Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. I deeply appreciate everybody being here, ready to go, given how late we were here last night. And hopefully some of these bills that have been messaged over to us from the Senate will help us, move things along and wrap up our work. So what we're doing this morning is taking a run through some of the bills that are on the calendar today. These are bills that were messaged over last night, H585 and further proposal of amendment on S310. So we're going to start with H585. And Rick, I think you and Tim collaborated on this one. So if you feel comfortable kind of walking us through your sections of the bill, and then I think Tim is on his way over from another engagement with the Senate committee.
Well, good morning. Welcome back. Rick Sagel, Office of Legislative Counsel. So do you guys have a copy or maybe on your screens? Should be 4.1 of H585. You may remember this is the bill that allows sheriffs and deputy sheriffs to join Group G if they so choose. And just as a reminder, starting January 1st, if this bill were to pass, every sheriff and eligible deputy sheriff would be in Group G. A newly hired deputy sheriff would be in Group G, or elected sheriff would be in Group G. So the version that passed the Senate last night, I believe, just a couple of changes on my end. On page 9 of the draft, section 4. Subsection A, the first line on line 10. You see, this is the session law where it's the one-time irrevocable election for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs. Subsection A, subject to the restrictions set forth in subdivision C1 of the section. Basically, there should be a list of positions established for this new Group G option period. So that subject to is. So if you turn to the next page or scroll down to your next page, C1, some new language there I want to highlight. A sheriff or deputy sheriff who qualifies for Group G membership pursuant to this act and that has a current level 2 or level 3 law enforcement officer certification from the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, that language is new, shall have a one-time option to transfer to Group G on or before December 1st, 2024. Also new line, starting with sheriffs and deputy sheriffs without a current level 2 or level 3 law enforcement officer certification from the Vermont Criminal Justice Council shall not be eligible to transfer to Group G. So just some language clarifying that if you want to have this one-time option to get into Group G, you must have a level 2 or level 3 law enforcement officer certification.
Does that include the deputies also, or just the sheriffs?
So yeah, deputies are already, if you look at page 2, this was already in the bill, line 15, subsection BB. An eligible deputy sheriff must have attained level 2 or level 3 law enforcement officer certification. So we're just kind of confirming that you must have that certification in order to be eligible. So this mostly applies to sheriffs who can be elected without the certification. Deputy sheriffs must also have the certification.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's really I said, Tim just walked in. Those were the changes to the language that I drafted. If Tim Devlin is ready, I may hand the baton to him for the other changes.
I just have one question, Rick, and that's in regards to that the current level 2 and level 3 law enforcement certification. Is going forward, if somebody were to achieve that didn't have it, would they then be eligible for Group G?
So this is just for the one-time choice. Okay. So if the sheriff gets elected, in November and takes office in January, I'm not quite sure when sheriffs take office in the state. Is it when?
February.
February. Okay, so they would enter the system in February 2025. So this would not apply to them. This is just for the one-time option to join the Group G. The newly hired sheriff or newly elected sheriffs after January 1st, you would look at the language on page 2, which is just all sheriffs.
Okay,
Yeah, moving forward, basically all deputies, so this is part of the transition line.
Right.
Going from F to G, then moving forward, anybody who's new is going into Group G.
Sheriffs, deputy sheriffs must still qualify, eligible deputy sheriffs, and there's that AA, BB, CC, they must be employed by county sheriff department. They must have attained level 2, level 3. Those things still apply to deputies. Sheriffs, if they're elected after January 1st, 2025, they would be put into Group G with or without a level 2 or level 3. Right. Yeah.
good to hear.
Okay, I think you just answered my question. I was going to ask, which is where I thought Rep. Higley was going, is if a sheriff were elected without the proper certification and then later got that certification, would they be eligible?
That wouldn't even matter, right? Yeah, they'd be Group G. Yep.
Essentially.
I think I heard you say elected after January.
Well,
Or,
I'm sorry, it's whenever they enter the retirement system.
Okay.
So that would be probably February. That's when they started.
Yeah,
Taking off.
swearing in is
Yeah.
what, the first Tuesday in February? Something like
if
that.
they're,
Yeah, it's right now.
if they reset reelected every 2 years, that make everybody,
No, because that would be, so sheriffs that are currently sheriffs, if they win re-election in November, they're not leaving and re-entering the system. They're remaining in the system, in the retirement system that they're currently in.
thank you.
Sure.
Anything else on the pension language before we go to Tim? Thank you very much.
I'll hang around in case there's other questions.
Gentlemen, welcome back. Long time no see.
Good morning, sir. Morning, everybody. For the record, my name is Tim Dublin, Legislative Counsel. And let's see, this should be, I'm going to speak to the portions of H 858 on the, sorry, where are we? Sheriff compensation, starting at the bottom of page 11. And the committee will recall that as this bill left this committee, there was a reduction or proposed amendment to 32 VSA.
Tim, what,
11.
Are you in
I'm on,
same draft, right? 4.1 of 585. Same, okay, go right.
858.
Yeah.
Yeah.
585. Thank you.
585.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Track it.
So this committee had proposed amending 32 VSA 1182 having to do with the compensation rate of sheriffs. And if the sheriff were to have their law enforcement officer certification permanently revoked, terminated, then their salary would be reduced by 30%. In the existing statute, it would be reduced by 10% if the sheriff does not have a level 3 law enforcement officer certification. What the Senate Government Operations Committee proposed to do and what the Senate adopted last evening was to add a few more sections and kind of build that out a little bit. So what they've done is essentially introduce additional tiers to that reduction in sheriff's salary based on level of certification. So it now reads subsection A, and sorry, I'm in section 6. A has the modifications of salary to match what's in the Pay Act right now. B is that part of existing statute talking about the reduction by 10%, if not having level 2, but also has the words for any sheriff who has level 2 but has not obtained level 3. Will have that 10% reduction. Subsection C in line 12 states compensation shall be reduced by 20% for any sheriff who has level 1 but not obtained level 2 law enforcement officer certification. And then D, compensation shall be reduced by 30% for any sheriff who does not possess a law enforcement officer certification. And it's silent as to if never, I should say, it applies to if the sheriff never had the certification, or if it's temporarily suspended, or if it's permanently revoked. So just adding a kind of a 20% middle reduction in that too. So depending on the law enforcement or the sheriff's level of law enforcement officer certification, they could receive full compensation, reduced by 10, reduced by 20, or possibly reduced by 30%. And to justify that, there's an intent section that the Senate Government Operations Committee inserted in the prior section, section 5. And this reads, "It is the intent of the General Assembly that a sheriff's compensation shall correlate with the sheriff's level of law enforcement officer certification to properly reflect the sheriff's capability to perform the various duties required to effectively and efficiently manage a law enforcement agency, that is, the office of the sheriff, office of sheriff."
And I certainly understand the, and think I'm good with it, the percentage changes for the level, but why is it necessary to put, you know, a sheriff has level 2, but not obtained level 3, level 1, and not obtained level 2? Why is that required?
The additional references to things, because there was initial concern that these would stack or be cumulative. And so this reduces that, or prevents that kind of reading from happening. So before, halfway through a deliberation in the Senate GovOps Committee, they realized, oh, it could be maybe construed to read that, you know, it would be 30 plus 20 plus 10 reduction. And like, that was not the intent.
60% reduction.
Right.
If they didn't do this
Oh, I see.
leveling, yeah, it could be interpreted. Yeah, so it's like, if you only had a level 1, then you get the 30 and the 20 for a 50% reduction. Yeah, that makes, wow, I never thought about that.
Right. So that additional, yeah, 3, that was counter that interpretation, make it very excessively clear.
And Tim, I wanted to ask if the, I'm assuming that the numbers that are shown in paragraph A are what we have in 889 of pay acts.
Sure they are, yeah.
Numbers, okay.
Yeah, they were copied over from the latest iteration of that. The next part of the bill has to do with state's attorney's office's operations report. And this, in essence, is tasking the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, or DSAS, to analyze the operations of state's attorney's offices with kind of an eye towards perhaps introducing a similar reduction in compensation for state's attorneys who may lose their attorney license in a temporary or permanent fashion. And exactly what proportion of the salary should be reduced if such an occurrence were to take place.
And so that's a report back asked from the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs.
Yes, to be due January 15th of next year.
Anybody have any more questions for Tim? I actually think that the construction that the Senate came up with accomplishes what we were trying to do, but actually makes it a little bit of a more elegant construction. So I'm supportive of the changes that they changed.
I seem to recall a testimony during the previous conversation about how if we did it this way, state's attorneys and sheriffs would not support it because they want the option to be able to have a fully qualified person with legal background be elected and still get full pay. Then this would preclude that. So do we need to hear anything?
We actually did. I was contacted by Sheriff Marcoux and Sheriff Anderson, and the Vermont Sheriff's Association does support the Senate as passed.
Okay.
What they were worried about was outright precluding somebody from becoming a sheriff. Was their main thing, but they're not as concerned with a reduction in salary, especially if that person has the opportunity to achieve one of these levels of certification while they're seeking or early in their service in the office.
You know, somebody with a lot of prosecutorial background be likely to get certified or once they were elected with that.
I think what they'd have to do if they wanted to go all the way to level 3 was actually spend the 16 weeks at the academy. Yeah, so I think the vast majority of people who've been sheriffs have always had at least a level 2. And so we've had on the books for a number of years that 10% reduction if you're only level 2. If you want to go all the way to level 3, you've got to do the full residential academy. It's much easier to get the level 2 certification. So I think worst, I think you'd probably be looking at an opportunity to relatively practically, unless you're disqualified for some other reason as an elected sheriff, be able to get that level 2 certification prior to, your first year in office being over. But the other thing I would say is, as we've learned with the sheriff's compensation, so with these numbers, we're looking at over a $70,000 a year salary for somebody who doesn't have a law enforcement certification. So, plus they would have the flexibility of being able to pay themselves additional compensation out of the sheriff's budget around admin. So I'm pretty comfortable with the 30%. I think if we'd gone much further, the sheriffs and some of us would probably start to worry a little bit more that we were constructively doing something that was going to make it difficult for somebody who, might be otherwise qualified, but didn't happen to have an LEO certification. Representative Hooper.
Representative Chase question brought to mind that, quite frankly, I have no idea what the curriculum in the academy is that constitutes 1, 2, 3, and whether or not, aside from having gone there, you pick the skills that are necessary to be a sheriff by going to law school. And, I think that's an empty spot in the judgment evaluation trail for me.
So last year, we did take a pretty significant amount of testimony, and we do have documents from Deputy Director Raquel and the Criminal Justice Council folks about the academy curriculum and how it's actually evolving right now. So we'll continue to do work on that, especially next year. Whoever's in our seats next year is going to be looking at essentially the full implementation of their 3-year plan. That's going to include more offerings for coursework and training outside of the academy itself, and some of their plans around making it more flexible and frequent for people to get LEO certification. So that's definitely an area where we're going to continue to work that is tangentially.
Yeah, I would assume there's like a lot more in like crime scene investigation, stuff like that, but that's an assumption.
One of the things that we heard pretty significant testimony on is especially around firearms training, use of force training. Level 3 has a significant, it's just so much more time, and you're doing the residential academy for all of those weeks. I think the conversation that we'll probably have in the future is, should you be able to do all the things that a law enforcement officer can do at level 2? Right now, I think the level 2, there's some debate. I mean, even some of the law enforcement professionals who are in the legislature have talked a little bit about, really most folks who are out there actually doing law enforcement activities, investigations, arrests, et cetera, should have a full-time level 3 certification. But I think that's a conversation we're going to have another day. Anything else on this for Tim? I would entertain a motion that we concur with the Senate's proposal of amendments 585. Heard. All those in favor of concurring with the Senate's proposal of amendment? It's 11:01. I will report that when we get to it. Whether that's today or tomorrow will remain to be seen.
Yes.
All right. Great. Mr. Devlin, I think our next item on the agenda is the Senate's further proposal of amendment to S310. That was fast.
Yes, and so this proposal, amendment really will strike out the recently added section 6A regarding the insertion of cyber benefits for law enforcement officers and correctional officers. This was the Higley McCarthy entirety of that amendment. And so it, in essence, undoes that latest amendment.
And maybe I shouldn't be asking you this, Tim, but what was their general disappointment with what was included in that amendment?
I don't know if I can really get too much into it aside from what was said a lot in testimony, which I think was just general concern that this happened late in the game. But I would probably point you towards Senator Hardy, sponsor of that amendment, to provide a more full answer.
So folks will recall that Bill H 695 that passed one of our fellow policy committees and got into appropriates late and stalled out on crossover week was really the language that we had here as the new section 6A. A lot of support on the House side, obviously, as evidenced by our amendment that we include law enforcement officers and correction officers. I know the Senate Government Operations Committee in their 310 work had all public works officers responding to, or public works professionals responding to an emergency. Welcome.
Come on in.
That all of those officers responding or professionals responding to an emergency be included. So we've got a House and a Senate disagreement here. Our original thought was there are a lot of groups to consider. Maybe we should pull this out of 310 and let 310 go on its way. We thought we had consensus around law enforcement officers and corrections officers at this point. The Senate clearly disagreed and wants to punt that conversation outside of 310. Where I'm at on this is we're late in the session and all of the work that we did on 310 was just concurred to by the Senate. So Tim, can you just confirm for me that if we on the floor today or tomorrow passed S310 and just concurred at this point with the further proposal, they are accepting all of the House language except for what was in 6A, the amendment that Representative Higley and I offered.
Correct.
Yeah, the only thing I've got to say about that is, this bill was taken up by General Housing, voted out 12-0. They took testimony on it. This is back a while ago now, and met crossover. And the provision that was in 310 originally that came over from the Senate, I believe we heard extensive testimony that a piece about public works employees receiving this as well wasn't vetted. It wasn't discussed enough. We had the treasurer's office in here talking about, hey, what's the number of people we're talking about? We don't really want the board to have to consider who should really receive it and who shouldn't. There's all these unanswered questions there. So I don't believe they did a good job on including them. For them to come back and say, no, we're going to yank this out because it's last minute. I mean, the amount of last minute stuff that we've done in this committee is unbelievable. And I don't appreciate that one little bit. And I don't what we can do to, we were talking about maybe sticking it on something else. I don't see anything else that looks like it's, would be germane. And I don't know. I mean, other than, a conference committee, which, I don't know if we have enough time for that either, but have you got any further ideas, Mr. Chair? Again, I appreciate your efforts in this for sure.
I would say that in context of S310, there is a fundamental disagreement between the House and the Senate positions on this piece. And I don't see a way for us to ensure that all the other really important policy in 310 gets done before we adjourn without concurring. I think we're in a position now because they were suspending the rules, slapped us back to us last night. That is not one where we have a lot of leverage here. I think that there was a general concern from the treasurer's office that if we expand the survivor benefit eligibility, that we should put more funding into it. And I think it would be really great for us to figure out who we believe should be eligible for this benefit, and it may include a specific subset of public works professionals responding to emergencies and law enforcement and corrections officers and the EMS and fire professionals that are already included in the eligibility, and then say, what's the actuarial, have the treasurer figure out what do we really need to do to make sure there's going to be money there, and put a little bit of money in every year so that, once every few years there's a claim or two, we are confident that there's going to be that funding there. And I think that there was less of a concern when it was that really well-defined group, as you said, Representative Higley. I'm feeling like the clock has just run out on us on this one, and we should definitely come back to it.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that, but in principle, I'm not gonna vote to concur.
Understood. Well, let's hear from, we got other hands here, so Representative Chase will come around the room.
I absolutely support what you just said about actuarial, like make this an ongoing thing instead of just an ad hoc. I absolutely support what Rep Higley said, and I am somewhat frustrated at the idea that a police officer could be a respondent to save somebody's life and die in the line of duty over the next year, and before that work happens and their family be left holding the bag because they don't have any life insurance or anything. And I think the work in 310 is significant enough that I will vote to concur, even though that my frustration is high.
Seth raises a valid point. We can't bind the future legislature, can we retroactively bind the past?
I think we do that with every law.
Well, I mean, the start date would be effective date. Could be retroactive. Never mind.
I think we could think about all that. What's before us is, do we go ahead and
Yes.
move 310 today? And my strong feeling is that we need what's in 310. It's very, very important. All the work we did on all those other sections is too important to hold up at this point in the legislative session. And I'm also very disappointed that we didn't get the survivor benefit eligibility for law enforcement officers.
Is there such a thing as concur with protest?
Like my reluctant yes vote.
Yeah, you really started trending that one.
So it could be reluctant.
So-
Yeah, please go ahead, Representative Hango, and then I'll go to you, Representative Murphy.
Thanks. I understand what everybody's saying. I think I know where everyone is coming from. I'm just very frustrated that for one bill like this, oops, sorry, we ran out of time, even though it meant crossover. And I'm frustrated with the Senate that we send bills to them and it sits there. And they don't do their due diligence and try to take up everybody's bill. We try to take up everybody's bill here. We took up at least 80 bills and sent them back out. We did our due diligence in this committee, and I don't think they're doing theirs. And the Vermont Month of the Veteran bill is another one that comes to mind. So I'm feeling very frustrated by this disingenuous, oh, we don't have time, when we have plenty of time to take up other things that, in my opinion, are a little bit less important than somebody's life who, they've lost in the line of duty. And I'm getting really frustrated with this legislature that people don't value the lives of folks who put their life on the line every single day. And this being the Military Affairs Committee, I'm just going to bring this up. Next week, I'm going to a conference, a military affairs conference, because I'm on a task force. And one of the things I'm supposed to do is bring to them a list of all the legislation that we've passed to help veterans this year. I don't have much to give them. I don't have much to contribute. And I find that really disheartening and very embarrassing. So just saying, I don't know what to do about this bill. Yes, we put a lot of work into it and we made it a lot better than what the Senate sent us, and I'm disappointed in that. And I'm also disappointed that the chair of the committee sponsored this amendment, co-sponsored this amendment, and they still wouldn't take it up. That's pretty poor, if you ask me, on their part.
Representative Marwicki, and then I'll come down the table.
I don't need to talk now, but I'll vote. Give my vote.
I agree with Representative Hango as the two letters that we now have tacked onto the back of our committee name. We ought to try to do something, although this year, I think what we have done to increase the range of the veterans home effectiveness is very significant potential for people in our state, so I would not be ashamed to stand on that.
Representative Morgan.
You'll probably all be mystified about what I'm about to say, but I don't think so. And I say it with a great level of prejudice, and I know some people will feel that, but, and I've always said that it can happen to the people that are below me. It doesn't need to happen at my grade, but I think we have a flagrant disregard as a whole for those that have served, because we haven't done anything to show some good faith, like Rep. Hango said. And I'm sorry, just that's the way I feel. And I feel like this amendment did that for those that have served. And yeah, I'm disheartened by it. I'm disappointed. I don't know what else to say. And I wish we could give her a list to take with her next week.
Representative Byron.
I just want to echo that, Representative Morgan. I mean, there is no shortage of bills, veteran-oriented, service-oriented, and other subject matter out of this committee that had hit a point of stagnation in the other chamber. As to 310, that is a massive scope of work in that bill, and especially the grant revolving loan program in there. That is vital for communities that are still recovering and all the other communities across the state that anticipate impacts of future events. And as much as this is an exceptionally frustrating piece of language being removed from here, I'm looking at the other components that are must pass, given what has happened last summer and what we're heading into inevitably with disasters and reacting to disasters. So I will support this amendment with much frustration, but I'm trying to keep in mind the broad scope of work and the impacts that the other sections of provisions have.
Representative Morgan.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, I may still be very opposed to this, but I support the parent bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
I think we're all on the same page pretty much. But it's extremely frustrating. We're the shoe on the other foot for them. I think there'd be a lot of time. I almost think is the way I feel right now. And I know that's probably bold to say, but I'm going, wait a minute. Again, like Rep. Higley said, I mean, I just, like I said, the chair and the senior member, the ranking member of this committee asked for this.
Representative Hango.
Thank you. I just want to say also 310 was a great bill and we did a lot of good work on that. But you all can get whatever bill you want to pass. I say this in all seriousness. You don't have to protest that this happened, but we do because our voices are not heard. So I will be a no on this, regardless of what 310 does. I know 310 is going to pass and it's going to do good work for our communities. But to be in our position and not have a voice except, oh, well, they said no, is really frustrating. So let's take a vote. I make a motion to find this, I don't know how to say it, unfavorable?
Amendment unfavorable.
To not concur.
Yeah, the motion would be to not concur. It's,
Right, to not concur.
Representative,
How much time do we have? To chat.
like actual time.
Yeah.
We don't have to take the position right now.
I don't know, I just,
I remove that motion.
I'd like to express something a little bit out of this particular realm.
Yeah, we can go until we get called up to the floor. Right there.
I guess as long as we're in the public realm now, I'd like to express what happened to a veteran this summer that reached out to me. And I say this because, again, we as a state legislative body don't have a lot of influence around that. Where I think, something like this and other things in our military affairs committee, we might have. But this was a Vietnam veteran who reached out to me, who got a letter from the VA stating that they had overpaid him for disability pension to the tune of $90,000, and they're expecting repayment. I reached out to Senator Sanders, Senator Welch, who's in Representative Balin's office. Senator Welch's office took the lead, not that they did much in the sense, but I reached out to the American Legion, who had also provided the application for this individual. In the end, the $90,000 was waived, but they cut his pension money in half. And it was basically because he had failed for the past 10 years. And he wasn't aware of this, that he had to supply the VA with the amount of Social Security that he had gotten every year. And of course, how much does Social Security go up a year? Not very much, right? And so again, I don't know all the details of his service time. I don't know. I do know that, he qualified for these benefits. And I think that's just such a tragedy. And then, of course, what we encouraged him to do, and he did, is sign up for food stamps and every other benefit in the state that you can have. So, that's kind of out of the realm, like I said, of this. But I just think it should be known that there's these sorts of things that are happening out there. And it's just unbelievable to me that can happen. And again, I'll go back to maybe bringing it back around a little bit, that if there are things that we can do in this committee with our second title of military affairs, and there's a little bit of a link here, I think, with this survivor's benefit. But yeah, just thought I'd get that out there, in the public eye for people to understand what's still going on out there in that regard. Thanks.
What is in 310, and to echo what Representative Byron said, one of the things I'm really proud of is that, we across the bodies are finally codifying the search and rescue teams and putting, in this budget, $250,000 towards supporting them. And, the people that are out there doing things like pulling 200 people out of floodwaters last year. We're doing more in this bill, and we have a lot more to do. And I'm hearing the frustration. I also am proud of a lot of the work that we've done this year, and I think both things can be really true. And the Senate didn't get everything they wanted this year out of us either. I think this time of year, we always kind of have to weigh what did we accomplish, and there was an awful lot there with what did we leave on the wall, and there's a lot there too. I've really tried as your chair, and I'm new at this, and this is my first end of the biennium as a committee chair, to listen to you all, hear what your priorities are, see a path to success with the rest of the body, with the Senate, with the governor, hopefully, and to, set an agenda for the committee that takes everybody's voices. But I understand that there are some things that I really wish we had done better, could have done. I'm also very proud of a lot of what we did. Both of those things can be true. So on this, I think Representative Hango's motion is that we not concur. I would say, then, just to not be confusing, we'll have the votes to not concur, since that was the motion that was made, and then the votes to concur. So all those in favor of the motion to not concur with the Senate's proposal. 4, 5. All those in favor of concurring with the Senate proposal of amendment. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So on a 5 not to concur and 6 to concur. Concur with the Senate's proposal of amendment. Really appreciate everybody's work on 310. This is a hard one. Yes.
Yeah.
So moving on, H 875, I had put up for any additional conversation this morning prior to us. Didn't know if anybody had any questions there. I thought that the most of what the Senate did was an improvement, and a couple of the things I'm a little bit they're not my favorite, let's say. Wouldn't be exactly how I would have done it. But on the whole, I think we've got an ethics package that expands, establishes the municipal code of ethics. It still keeps investigatory power down at the local level for the beginning. It expands a couple of seats to give municipal voice on the Ethics Commission. On the state side, we're moving forward and progressing toward other states that have higher marks from good government groups with the way that they empower their ethics commissions. But it takes a thoughtful approach to kicking out the effective date so that there's time for the Ethics Commission to add staff and prepare for having additional responsibilities. And I think the increased disclosures are what good government groups from the right to the left have been asking us to do for years and years. And that's all good and worthy stuff that we should try to move forward. So I don't know if other folks need any more time before taking a position on whether we should concur with the Senate's ethics proposal, but we could come back to it later. But if folks are ready, we can take a position on it now, defer to the committee.
I agree. I don't love some of the things that they took out, but I think as a whole, it's accomplishing at least what we set out to do eventually. So I would concur.
Then I would entertain a motion that we concur with the Senate's proposal of amendment to H 875.
Sure, I'll make that motion.
All right, Representative Waters, and move that we concur. Any further discussion? Representative Hango.
I just want to know if I cannot vote because I was not here yesterday for the walkthrough of the Senate's proposal.
You're still entitled to vote.
I don't want to vote. Nothing bad.
I guess what I'd say is, I would be happy for us to postpone the vote. There's not really an opportunity for somebody who's seated in the room to abstain in our rules, so.
Check your mailbox.
Okay.
Fix coming out, right?
All right, any further discussion on this? All those in favor of concurring on the Senate's proposal of amendment? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those opposed? All right, so we are 912. 912, you got that for your notes?
Yeah, I mean, it's in my brain, but now it's gonna be in my hands.
Great work this morning. Thank you all for getting through this. Be on the lookout for communication from me or Andrea about if the Senate messages over other things during breaks on the floor. We may try to meet again today to concur or not on other proposals. I believe that they concurred in our proposal of amendment to 872, the Criminal Justice Council bill. So we won't have any more work on that because they just went ahead and voted out our bill last night, I believe. We are still some things in motion around the cannabis bill that we may need to take a look at. But Representative Barhong and I have been trying to find the path forward on the citing provisions. There's been a lot of debate between multiple Senate committees and advocates around trying to find a compromise there. So I think that we're going to be able to pull the committee together to talk about that at some point today. So be on the lookout for that. Representative Chase.
And to be clear, they've said explicitly that the month of the veteran is dead, right?
They are not planning on moving that bill.
Still hoping.
All right. Well, thanks. I'll see you up on the floor. We'll adjourn and go out live.
Thank you.